Mary had a little lamb.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
All right, so here's where we are. We're in a break. We're in a recess. The House Oversight Committee obviously is taking live testimony today from one Michael Cohen, the former fixer for the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and it is very contentious. It is unbelievably riveting. You cannot take your eyes off of it. The reason why we're in recess, though, is because the House actually had a vote on a universal background check bill for gun safety. And so they've been in a break for over an hour now so that everybody's vote can be recorded, and that bill is likely to pass. Of course, Mitch McConnell will probably never bring it up in the Senate. So let me recap for you what has happened so far this morning. I'm ready to air this live as soon as they go back into session so that you can hear Michael Cohen, testify under oath. Now, here's what you need to remember. I mean, the Republicans, obviously, you got Jim Jordan, who stood silent while, tons and tons of boys in varsity sports at Ohio State University were molested in a shower that he used as well by his friend Dr. Strauss, who died now. And Jim Jordan, is actually lying now about knowing about the molestation of all these boys. So, take whatever Jim Jordan says with a grain of salt, okay? That's number one. Number two, the Republicans have nothing except to call Michael Cohen a liar over and over and over again. This is their tact. This is what they're doing all day. And it's really fascinating because through this testimony, what we found out is a couple of things. Number one, if Michael Cohen lies again today to Congress, then most likely his sentence will go from the 3-year plea deal to 70 years because he was convicted of things that carry with them a total of 70 years in prison because he's been cooperating and because he's, made the record straight, because he's produced documents, because he has, cooperated with Mueller and with SDNY. His sentence has been reduced to 3 years. But if he lies today, everything gets rescinded and he's on the hook for 70 years in prison. So I really think he's got a lot of reason not to lie. Just saying. But in this testimony today, what we learned is that Roger Stone is still lying. The lawyers for Donald Trump, including Michael Cohen, everyone from Jay Sekulow to the TV lawyer, as Cohen has referred to Giuliani, that Roger Stone is still lying, that Jay Sekulow, when we suspected he was lying to us on the TV, was lying, and that Donald Trump was given a heads up by Roger Stone about the WikiLeaks document dumps as they were about to happen. So, we learned a lot today, but here is the opening statement from Michael Cohen. I've edited it, okay? So this is only, instead of the 30 minutes of opening that he gave, this will come to about 5 minutes, okay? 5 minutes.
I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat. I lied to Congress when Mr. Trump stopped negotiating the Moscow Tower project in Russia. There were at least a half a dozen times between the Iowa caucus in January of 2016 and the end of June when he would ask me, "How's it going in Russia?" referring to the Moscow Tower project. You need to know that Mr. Trump's personal lawyers reviewed and edited my statement to Congress about the timing of the Moscow Tower negotiations before I gave it. So to be clear, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it. He lied about it because he never expected to win. He also lied about it because he stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars on the Moscow real estate project. Stated Mr. Trump knew from Roger Stone in advance about the WikiLeaks drop of emails. In July of 2016, days before the Democratic convention, I was in Mr. Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone.
Oh, my God.
Mr. Trump put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone.
Oh, my God.
Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, "Wouldn't that be great?" Mr. Trump is a racist. The country has seen Mr. Trump court white supremacists and bigots. You have heard him call poorer countries shitholes in private. He is even worse. He once asked me if I could name a country run by a black person that wasn't a shithole. This was when Barack Obama was president of the United States. And while we were once driving through a struggling neighborhood in Chicago, he commented that only black people could live that way. And he told me that black people would never vote for him because they were too stupid. Mr. Trump is a cheat. I am giving to the committee today 3 years of Mr. Trump's personal financial statements from 2011, 2012, and 2013, which he gave to Deutsche Bank to inquire about a loan to buy the Buffalo Bills and to
Jesus.
Forbes. Mr. Trump is a con man. He asked me to pay off an adult film star with whom he had an affair and to lie about it to his wife, which I did. Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from a home equity line of credit to avoid any money being traced back to him that could negatively impact his campaign. I am providing a copy of a $35,000 check that President Trump personally signed from his personal bank account on August 1st of 2017 to reimburse me, the word used by Mr. Trump's TV lawyer, for the illegal hush money I paid on his behalf. This $35,000 check was one of 11 check installments
11.
that was paid throughout the year while he was president.
Oh, my God.
Other checks to reimburse me for the hush money payments were signed by Donald Trump Jr. and Alan Weisselberg. When I say con man, I'm talking about a man who declares himself brilliant, but directed me to threaten his high school, his colleges, and the college board to never release his grades or SAT scores. Sometime in the summer of 2017, I read all over the media that there had been a meeting in Trump Tower in June of 2016 involving Don Jr. and others from the campaign with Russians. Something clicked in my mind. I remembered being in a room with Mr. Trump, probably in early June of 2016, when something peculiar happened. Don Trump Jr. came into the room and walked behind his father's desk, which in and of itself was unusual. People didn't just walk behind Mr. Trump's desk to talk to him. And I recall Don Jr. leaning over to his father and speaking in a low voice, which I could clearly hear, and saying, "The meeting is all set." And I remember Mr. Trump saying, "Okay, good, let me know." That Mr. Trump had frequently told me and others that his son Don Jr. had the worst judgment of anyone in the world.
Oh, my God.
And also that Don Jr. would never set up any meeting of significance alone, and certainly not without checking with his father. The sad fact is that I never heard Mr. Trump say anything in private that led me to believe he loved our nation or wanted to make it better. In fact, he did the opposite.
Yeah, and then he goes on to say that when he received a tax refund of $10 million, he said how stupid America is, that they give, guys like him $10 million tax refunds. That was just the beginning of the day. That was the opening statement that Michael Cohen offered. The actual opening statement in its entirety is on RandiRhodes.com. Just go to the homework section and you can see it for yourself. It's 20 pages. Print it out. Take it to the bathroom. It'll just make your head spin. And, maybe you don't want to do it while you're in the bathroom then. But it's just an amazing thing. The questions were even more disgusting. You actually had, after, Michael Cohen asserts that Donald Trump is worse in private, he is really a racist, and he explains to you that he has never seen a country headed by a black person that wasn't a shithole while Obama was president, and that he's driving through a depressed neighborhood in Chicago, and he said only black people will live like this, and that black people were too stupid to vote for him, as various examples of Donald Trump's racism. And, of course, we know the whole thing about the Central Park Five, and they deserve the death penalty. And then even during the campaign, after DNA evidence actually proved that the people that Donald Trump was calling to receive the death penalty were innocent and had served years in prison wrongfully, he said he didn't care and that they should still get the death penalty. So even after that, you had the Republicans trying to defend Donald Trump as not being a racist. And this was a real showstopper, everybody. This one's going to make your head spin, okay? Got to tell you, Mark Meadows is a lunatic. He's also one of those freedom crackers. And he decided that he was going to bring out a girl named Lynn Patton, who has just ruined her life. I just hope you know that, Lynn. You ruined your life today. She stood up as a staffer of Mark Meadows, because Michael Cohen helped her to get a job on the staff of Congressman Mark Meadows. She was a party planner at Donald Trump's organization. And now she works somewhere in HUD, where apparently that's the agency where all Trump's black friends go to work. Ben Carson is the head of HUD. Lynn Patton was sent to HUD. But he actually brought her out. He trotted this girl out. This is just an aside. This has nothing to do with illegality. This is just vile, okay? That Mark Meadows and these Republicans, Jim Jordan, who I told you, stood silent while all these boys were molested, brought out Lynn Patton, who happens to be a black woman, to point out that Donald Trump can't possibly be a racist.
Do you know Lynn Patton?
Yes, I do.
I asked Lynn to come today in her personal capacity to actually shed some light. How long have you known Miss Patton?
I'm responsible for Lynn Patton joining the Trump organization and the job that she currently holds.
Well, I'm glad you acknowledged that, because you made some very demeaning comments about the president that Miss Patton doesn't agree with. In fact, it has to do with your claim of racism. She says that as a daughter of a man born in Birmingham, Alabama, that there is no way that she would work for an individual who was racist. How do you reconcile the two of those, Mr.
As neither should I, as the son of a Holocaust survivor.
But, Mr. Cohen, I guess what I'm saying is I've talked to the president over 300 times. I've not heard one time a racist comment out of his mouth in private. So how do you reconcile it? Do you have proof of those conversations?
I would ask you to.
Do you have tape recordings of those conversations?
No, sir.
Well, you've taped everybody else. Why wouldn't you have a tape?
That's also not true, sir. That's not true.
You haven't taped anybody?
I have taped individuals.
How many times have you taped individuals?
Maybe 100 times over 10 years.
Is that a low estimate? Because I've heard it's over 200 times.
No, I don't think. I think it's approximately about 100, from what I recall. But I would ask you.
Why would
you ask me a question, sir?
Do you have proof? Do you have proof? Yes or no?
I do.
Oh, where's the proof?
Ask Miss Patton how many people who are black are executives at the Trump organization, and the answer is zero.
Mr. Cohen, we can go through this. I would ask unanimous consent that her entire statement be put in the record.
This was so disgusting. I mean, I swear to God, everybody knows that on The Celebrity Apprentice that Mark Burnett is sitting on these tapes because, as Omarosa has told you, Donald Trump is a brutally racist person, bringing out this one young lady who happens to be black to show, I mean, Michael Cohen's answer was absolutely great. I mean, as I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor. I shouldn't work for Trump either, because he praises neo-Nazis as being fine people. I mean, is there anyone in this audience that hasn't heard Donald Trump be racist? Is there anybody that doesn't recall he wanted a Muslim ban? Is there anybody who doesn't recall that he says Mexicans are rapists and they're murderers and drug dealers? Is there anybody that doesn't know that Donald Trump has called various nations shitholes because of the color of the skin of the majority of inhabitants in that particular part of the world? I mean, honestly, what proof do you have?
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
I just want to put on the record as being a black American and having endured the public comments of racism from the sitting president, as being a black person, I can only imagine what's being said in private. And to prop up one member of our entire race of black people and say that that nullifies that is totally insulting. And in this environment of expecting a president to be inclusive and to look at his administration speaks volume.
People are people.
Thank you, Congressman Brenda Lawrence, who points out many hours later, after, a freaking Mark Meadows, the freedom cracker, pulls this little stupid stunt. I mean, it was hideous. That was really disgusting. All right, they're about to gavel back in, but they're not gaveled back in quite yet. It was a little premature, as men can be. So let me just play you some of the criminal testimony, testimony that Michael Cohen gave under oath that implicates Donald Trump in crimes, okay? This is Representative Katie Hill from California, okay?
On February 13th, 2018, Mr. Cohen, you sent a statement to the reporters that said, quote, I used my own personal funds to facilitate a payment of $130,000 to Ms. Stephanie Clifford, and neither the Trump Organization nor the Trump campaign was party to the transaction with Ms. Clifford, and neither reimbursed me for the payment either directly or indirectly. Was the statement false?
The statement is not false. I purposefully left out Mr. Trump individually from that statement.
Okay. Why did you say it that way?
Because that's what was discussed to do between myself, Mr. Trump, and Alan Weisselberg.
So it was carefully worded.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Mr. Cohen, a reporter for the magazine Vanity Fair has reported that she interviewed you the very next day on February 14th, 2018, about the payment and reimbursement. And she wrote, quote, last February 14th, I interviewed Cohen in his office about the statement he gave the FEC in which he said Trump didn't know about the Stormy payment or reimburse him for it. Do you recall this meeting with the reporter?
I do.
The reporter also wrote, Trump called while I was there. I couldn't hear much, but he wanted to go over what the public messaging would be. Is that accurate?
It is.
Did the president call you while you were having a meeting with the reporter?
Yes.
Did the president call you to coordinate on public messaging about the payments to Ms. Clifford's in or around February 2018?
Yes.
What did the president ask or suggest that you say about the payments or reimbursements?
He was not knowledgeable of these reimbursements, and he wasn't knowledgeable of my actions.
He asked you to say that?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. In addition to the personal check for $35,000 in July 2017, is there additional corroborating evidence that Mr. Trump, while a sitting president of the United States, directly reimbursed you hush money as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance laws?
There are 11 checks that I received for the year. The reason why 11, because, as I stated before, one had 2 checks.
And you have copies of all of those?
I can get copies. I'd have to go to the bank.
So we will be able to get copies of all 11 checks that Mr. Trump provided to you as part of this criminal scheme?
It's either from his personal account, as what was demonstrated in the exhibit, or it would come from the Donald J. Trump account, the trust account.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Really? I mean, that was easy. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. It was yes, no, yes, yes, yes. I have checks. Yes, there are 11 checks, and he was doing it as a sitting president. That is evidence of one crime. We also have evidence that on the record now, under oath, that, Roger Stone was communicating with WikiLeaks and that he had called into Trump's office Rona Graff, who is the secretary who shares an office right next door to Donald Trump, yells out on, across the offices. This is Trump's personal secretary, Rona Graff, who you'll remember at the very beginning of this investigation was interviewed. They flew to New York to interview her. Remember? She didn't want to go to D.C., so they came to her. The Mueller people did, to interview her. And she apparently yells out, Roger Stone is on the phone. Michael Cohen is in the office, puts Roger Stone on the speakerphone, and Roger Stone says that he just got off the phone with Julian Assange and that Julian Assange is preparing yet another dump of documents regarding Hillary Clinton. Some people are going to argue that was public knowledge because June 12th, Julian Assange was on ITV and he said that he had these emails and he was going to start releasing them. Well, he did start releasing them, and then he was informing, apparently, the Trump campaign through Roger Stone, through the whole thing, when the next ones would be dumped. It was just, wow, this was unbelievable. And then Jackie Spear, I'm going to play Jackie Spear before we go back, because right now they are arguing about paperwork in the committee, and it's not, I'm going to wait until they actually start asking questions here, but here.
How many times did Mr. Trump ask you to threaten an individual or entity on his behalf?
Quite a few times.
50 times?
More.
100 times?
More.
200 times?
More.
500 times?
Probably.
Oh, my God.
Over the 10 years?
Over the 10 years, he asked you...
And when you say threaten, I'm talking with litigation or an argument with...
intimidation.
A nasty reporter that is writing an article.
That's your president, everybody. That's your president. He asked his attorney over 10 years, more than 500 times, to threaten people. All right, here's Jamie Raskin asking Michael Cohen about the timing of the Trump Moscow, the tower in Moscow statement. And who were the lawyers in, that around Trump that told you and allowed you and orchestrated the editing of your statement to Congress that you had to plead guilty to? The reason why he's going to jail, okay, for lying to Congress. Who were the lawyers? And he names them.
You said you lied to Congress about Trump's negotiations to build his Moscow tower because he'd made it clear to you that he wanted you to lie. One of the reasons you knew this is because, quote, Mr. Trump's personal lawyers reviewed and edited my statement to Congress about the timing of the Moscow tower negotiations before I gave it. So this is a pretty breathtaking claim, and I just want to get to the facts here. Which specific lawyers reviewed and edited your statement to Congress on the Moscow tower negotiations, and did they make any changes to your statement?
There were changes made, additions. Jay Sekulow, for one.
Were there changes about the timing? The question of...
Gentleman's time has expired. You may answer that question.
There were several changes that were made, including how we were going to handle that message.
Mr.
Which
Grover,
was...
were you finished?
Yes, the message, of course, being the length of time that the Trump Tower Moscow project stayed and remained alive.
Jay Sekulow, who appeared on television, Rudy Giuliani, who appeared on television all the time. I mean, just lying, knowing that Donald Trump stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars from this largest building in Europe, Trump Moscow deal. And these lawyers edited Michael Cohen's congressional testimony under a joint defense agreement, okay, so that everybody would tell the same lie. And the only one so far who's going to jail for this is Michael Cohen. All right, I believe that they are back now, and let's just listen in and see what's going on.
According to the criminal charges against you, you sent monthly invoices containing false information to an individual identified as Executive One. Weisselberg is Executive One, correct?
Yes.
The criminal charge against you then states that Executive One forwarded your invoice to someone referred to as Executive Two. Presumably, Donald Trump Jr., who's signing this check, is executive too, correct?
I believe so.
Oh, boy.
As federal prosecutors laid out in their criminal charges, payments like this check resulted in numerous false statements in the books and records of the Trump Organization. And it's important for the American public to understand this. Nothing to do with collusion. This is financial fraud, garden variety financial fraud. It was disguised as a payment for legal services to you. But this was not a payment for legal services, was it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
It could give rise to serious state and federal criminal liability if a corporation is cooking its books. Based on your testimony today, Donald Trump Jr. and Alan Weisselberg directed this payment to you and approved this payment. Is that right?
Mr. Trump initially acknowledged the obligation, the debt. Myself and Alan Weisselberg went back to his office, and I was instructed by Alan at the time that they were going to do this over 12 installments. And what he decided to do then was to have me send an invoice, in which case they can have a check cut. And then, yes, the answer would be yes to your follow-up.
And Donald Trump Jr. obviously signed off on this.
Yes, well, it would either be Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and or Alan Weisselberg, but always Alan Weisselberg on the check.
And you think executive two is Donald Trump Jr.?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
They knew that this payment was false and illegal, correct?
I can't make that conclusion.
You told Representative Kelly that the president was aware of this scheme. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I just want the American public to understand the explosive nature of your testimony in this document. Are you telling us, Mr. Cohen, that the president directed transactions in conspiracy with Alan Weisselberg and his son, Donald Trump Jr., as part of a criminal conspiracy of financial fraud? Is that your testimony today?
Yes.
And do you know if this criminal financial scheme that the president, Alan Weisselberg, and Donald Trump Jr. are involved in is being investigated by the Southern District of New York?
I'd rather not discuss that question because it could be part of an investigation that's currently ongoing.
But I just want the American public to understand that solely apart from Bob Mueller's investigation, there is garden variety financial fraud. And your allegation and the explosive smoking gun document suggests that the president, his son, and his CFO may be involved in a criminal conspiracy. And isn't it true, Mr. Cohen, that this criminal conspiracy that involved 4 people, that there's only one person so far who suffered the repercussions, and that's why you're in jail?
We'll be going to jail, yes.
There are 3 other people, though, who were equally involved in this conspiracy. Is that true?
It is true.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Okay, here comes a Republican next, and this should be interesting because all they keep doing is, why should we believe you when you're a liar? Why should we believe you?
Mr. Cohen, I'm going to tackle the president's tax returns. During the 2016 campaign, you said you personally wouldn't, quote, allow him to release those returns until the audits are over, unquote. For the record, nothing prevents individuals from sharing their own tax returns, even while under audit by the IRS. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether President Trump's tax returns were really under audit by the IRS in 2016?
I don't know the answer. I asked for a copy of the audit so that I could use it in terms of my statements to the press, and I was never able to obtain one.
Okay. So do you have any inside knowledge about what was in the president's tax returns that he refused to release?
I do not.
Can you give us any insight into what the real reason is that the president has refused to release his tax returns?
Statements that he had said to me was that what he didn't want was to have an entire group of think tanks that are tax experts run through his tax return and start ripping it to pieces, and then he'll end up in an audit and he'll ultimately have taxable consequences, penalties, and so on.
So that's an interesting point, that basically he said he didn't want to release his tax returns because he might end up in an audit. So could you presume from that statement that he wasn't under audit.
I presume that he's not under audit.
Oh, my God.
And the reason why I bring this up, because I'm also the only Democrat on this committee that also serves on the Committee of Ways and Means. It's the chief tax writing committee in the House of Representatives. And it's the only committee in the House of Representatives that has jurisdiction to request an American's tax returns. And that includes the President of the United States. My constituents need to know whether the president has financial ties that are causing him to protect his own bottom line rather than the best interest of this country. Can he be blackmailed because of his financial and business ventures, including by foreign governments? And I know the opposition is the first thing they're going to ask or say is that he released his financial disclosure forms. But I believe that there's other things we can learn from his taxes. Do you have any idea what we can learn in his tax returns if we actually we got our hands on them?
No, I've seen them. I just have never gone through them. They're quite long.
Quite long. One of the things I also find ironic is the way they're kind of attacking you is to undermine your credibility. Is one of the ways is by saying that you committed bank fraud and tax evasion. And the reason why is a big deal is that it really goes down to a person's character when it comes to taxes. But yet the Republican minority has never asked to see his taxes, right? Something that for 40 years, Democrats and Republicans alike have released their tax returns to prove to the American people that they didn't have financial interests that would be leverageable by a foreign government. But this minority refuses to ask for his tax returns. I also want to kind of go on. I'm noticing a pattern about the president and those in his inner circle. Special counsel Robert Mueller's team has indicted or received guilty pleas from 34 people and 3 companies that we know of, the latest being long-term Trump advisor Roger Stone. That group includes 6 former Trump advisors. It appears that the president has a fondness for entrusting those who will, 1, lie for him, 2, break the law for him, 3, cheat the system for him. Essentially, he wants to surround himself with people who are just like him. Would you agree with that statement?
From the facts and circumstances, it appears so.
Mr. Cohen, the American people have a lot of questions when it comes to this president, to his conduct. When he went to Helsinki and he bowed before Vladimir Putin. And nobody can really understand why he acts the way he acts. And we believe that the way we get those answers is really looking at everybody that surrounds him, who he's been associated with, and his tax returns, because that is the only way that we can get down to the bottom line. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I need to tell you that was a Democrat, Jimmy Gomez from California.
I ask unanimous consent that we read for the record, a tweet from Dr. Darrell Scott, which says,
Mark Meadows.
Michael Cohen begged me repeatedly to ask POTUS to give him a job in the administration. He is still lying under oath. I ask unanimous consent.
Objection.
I have one more from Bob Deedle. Getting sick watching these hearings. I know Michael Cohen personally for many years, and he told me several times that he was very angry and upset that he didn't get a post in the White House, and that he, quote, would do what he has to do now to protect his family, close quote. I ask that be.
Mr. Chairman.
I thank you.
Mr. Chairman, 2 quick ones.
And then if we got other ones, we're going to do you, Mr. Ranking Member, then we'll do the other ones at the end, because I have some things too that I want to get in. Go ahead.
All right. I ask unanimous consent that an article in Salon magazine written by Stanley Brand, former
Jordan.
House counsel to Tip O'Neill, titled the article is Oversight Committee Session with Michael Cohen Looks Like an Illegitimate Show Hearing.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that a letter that Mr. Meadows and I sent to you, the chairman, requesting that you call Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to testify at this hearing also be part of the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Just 1 second, all right? The article by Mr. Barron.
Yep.
I just want to deal with this one right away. When we saw that article, Mr. Ranking Member, we knew that it was inaccurate. I mean, just on basics. I mean, the cases that Mr. Brand use are definitely distinguishable for what's going on here. And so we got Irvin B. Nathan, former general counsel of the House from 2007 to 2010, and she says, in short, the committee has ample jurisdiction and responsibility to hear and consider the upcoming voluntary testimony of Mr. Cohen. That's dated February 25th, 2019, and I want to enter that into record without objection. So ordered. Where are we?
AOC.
Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cohen, I'd like to quickly pick up on some previous lines of questioning before getting into my own, so I may go a little quickly to get it all in 5 minutes. First, my colleague from Vermont had asked you several questions about AMI, the parent company of the National Enquirer. And in that, you mentioned a treasure trove, a quote, treasure trove of documents in David Pecker's office relating to information assembled from all these catch and kill operations against people who potentially had damaging information on the president. You also mentioned that the president was very concerned about the whereabouts of these documents and who possessed them. Does that treasure trove of documents still exist?
I don't know. I had asked David Pecker for them.
So you would say the person who knows the whereabouts of these documents would be David Pecker?
David Pecker, Barry Levine, or Dylan Howard.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, I want to ask a little bit about your conversation with my colleague from Missouri about asset inflation. To your knowledge, did the president ever provide inflated assets to an insurance company?
Yes.
Who else knows that the president did this?
Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
And where would the committee find more information on this? Do you think we need to review his financial statements and his tax returns in order to compare them?
Yes, and you'd find it at the Trump org.
Thank you very much. The last thing here, the Trump Golf Organization currently has a golf course in my home borough of the Bronx, Trump Links. I drive past it every day, going between the Bronx and Queens. In fact, the Washington Post reported on the Trump Links Bronx course in an article entitled, "Taxpayers Built This New York Golf Course and Trump Reaps the Rewards." That article is where many New Yorkers and people in the country learned that taxpayers spent $127 million to build Trump Links in a, quote, generous deal, allowing President Trump to keep almost every dollar that flows in on a golf course built with public funds. And this doesn't seem to be the only time the president has benefited at the expense of the public. Mr. Cohen, I want to ask you about your assertion that the president may have improperly devalued his assets to avoid paying taxes. According to an August 21st, 2016 report by the Washington Post, while the president claimed in financial disclosure forms that Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter, Florida, was worth more than $50 million, he had reported otherwise to local tax authorities that the course was worth, quote, no more than $5 million. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether this specific report is accurate?
It's identical to what he did at Trump National Golf Club at Briarcliff Manor.
Do you know, to your knowledge, was the president interested in reducing his local real estate bills, tax bills?
Yes.
And how did he do that?
What you do is you deflate the value of the asset, and then you put in a request to the tax department for a deduction.
Thank you. Now, in October 2018, the New York Times revealed that, quote, President Trump participated in dubious tax schemes during the 1990s, including instances of outright fraud that greatly increased the fortune he received from his parents. It further stated from Mr. Trump, quote, he also helped formulate a strategy to undervalue his parents' real estate holdings by hundreds of millions of dollars on tax returns, sharply reducing his tax bill when those properties were transferred to him and his siblings. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether that specific report is accurate?
I don't. I wasn't there in 1990s.
Who would know the answer to those questions?
Alan Weisselberg.
And would it help for the committee to obtain federal and state tax returns from the president and his company to address that discrepancy?
I believe so.
Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Ms. Presley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, this is Ayanna
one more
Presley.
Time, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you for your leadership and the way in which you comport yourself. And I know there are some that would have you believe that the more you say something, the more true it is. But in fact, this committee, thanks to your leadership and our Democratic majority, has been doing the work of the American people. Before this committee alone, we looked at the issue of making Election Day a federal holiday, reducing drug pricing, and pursued subpoenas to reunite families. And just recently, before we returned here, tried to pass a universal background check gun bill. So we are doing the business of the American people, including today. It has been said that the best sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Electric light is the most efficient policeman. Well, let there be light. Because the point of oversight is for us to pursue the trust, to pursue the truth and justice for the American people, to understand if lies, deceit, and corruption are threatening American democracy and indeed our safety. Mr. Chairman, charities should not be abused as personal piggy banks. It is both against the law and extremely unfair to charities that play by the rules. A line of questioning that we have not yet addressed and we've been glaringly absent in tackling is that of the abuses of the Trump Foundation. Now, the President's Charitable Foundation agreed to dissolve in response to an ongoing investigation and lawsuit by the New York Attorney General. The New York Attorney General found what it called, quote, clear and repeated violations of state and federal law, including, quote, repeated and willful self-dealing by the Trump administration. Apologies, by the foundation. If I understand your opening statement correctly, in mid-2013, you arranged for a straw purchaser to bid $60,000 for a portrait of Mr. Trump painted by the artist William Quigley at a charity auction. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why would the president want to bid up the price of something that he was ultimately paying for?
It's all about ego.
How was it paid for?
I believe it was paid for by a check from the trust.
And abuse, and again, you know, this is not a partisan pursuit here. I think ultimately what we're demonstrating is patriotism. This is about what is right and just for the American people. Did the straw purchaser purchase the painting and then the foundation funds reimburse the straw purchaser? Can you explain the mechanics of that payment?
I'm not involved with the foundation.
Okay. Did the president know what was happening?
Oh, yes.
And how did you know he knew what was happening?
Because he tasked me to find the straw bidder to ensure that his painting, which was going last in the auction, would go for the highest amount of any of the paintings that have been put on the auction block for the day.
And what happened to the painting?
I believe it's in one of the clubs.
Okay. According to the New York Attorney General in March 2014, Mr. Trump again used the foundation to pay $10,000 for the winning bid on another portrait of Mr. Trump that ended up as decor in one of his golf courses in Miami. Mr. Cohen, are you familiar with that transaction?
Yes.
Are you aware of any other instances where the Trump Foundation was used to benefit the Trump family?
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
So there was a contract that I ended up creating on Mr. Trump's behalf for, it was a Ukrainian oligarch by the name of Viktor Pinchuk. And it was that Mr. Trump was asked to come and to participate in what was the Ukrainian-American Economic Forum. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to go, but I was able to negotiate 15 minutes by Skype where they would have a camera very much like, a television camera, very much like that one. And they would translate Mr. Trump to the questioner, and then he would respond back. And I negotiated a fee of $150,000 for 15 minutes. I was directed by Mr. Trump to have the contract done in the name of the Donald J. Trump Foundation, as opposed to Donald J. Trump for services rendered.
Thank you. Any other abuses of the foundation that you'd like to share? Again, it is against the law, and again, extremely unfair to charities that are playing by the rules.
Not at this time, but if I think of one, I'll
Okay.
pass it along.
And then for the balance of my time, would you agree that someone could deny rental units to African Americans, lead the birther movement, refer to the diaspora as shithole countries, and refer to white supremacists as fine people, have a black friend, and still be racist?
Yes.
I agree.
Young lady, time is as far as you may. May I answer the question?
Oh, yeah.
I did, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have two unanimous consent. Since we're finishing up, before we get done, I want to go ahead and.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I just want
Yes,
to.
sir.
All right.
I wanted to get to Mr. Talib, and then I'll come to you. Okay.
Okay,
Mr.
Rashida
they've
Tlaib
been
from
waiting all
Michigan
day.
as well.
Mr. Talib.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all of you, for centering this committee on our sole purpose is exposing the truth. And some of my colleagues can't handle the truth, and this is unfortunate because it's the center of what is protecting our country right now. The people at home are frustrated, Mr. Cohen, and they want criminal schemes to stop, especially those from the Oval Office. Mr. Cohen, I am upset and know that my residents feel the same way, that a man you worked for the past 10 years is using the most powerful position in the world to hurt our country solely for personal gain. We are upset that some of our colleagues here are so disconnected of what it means to have this president of the United States sending checks to cover bribe payments, not hush payments, bribe payments you made on his behalf. One in 2017 of March, and another August 2017 after he was sworn in as president. They are upset that while my colleagues are trying to discredit your testimony by some of your own unlawful acts and lies, that they are disconnected with the fact that you were the personal lawyer for this president of the United States, that this president chose you as his legal counsel. My stance has always been the same, Mr. Chairman, based on the facts, not on future reports that we're all waiting on. My residents back home don't need a collusion cause with a foreign government to know this president, individual one, has disregarded the law of the land, the United States Constitution, and that he has misused his pardon powers. In the sentencing memo, Mr. Cohen, filed by the federal prosecutors in New York in December of last year, they stated, quote, in particular, and as Cohen himself has now admitted with respect to both payments, he acted in coordination with and at the direction of individual one. Mr. Cohen, as you know, President Donald J. Trump brand comes first, not the American people. Based on what you know now, based on what we know now, is that individual one used his money, businesses, and platform to enrich himself, his brand, and then the process directed you, Mr. Cohen, to commit multiple felonies, and you covered it up, correct?
That's correct.
You called it protecting his brand, correct?
And him as well.
Mr. Cohen, with this, do you think the President of the United States is making decisions in the best interest of the American people?
No, I don't.
Especially those you said that he used horrible words about, like African Americans, Muslim Americans, and immigrants?
Yes.
Just to make a note, Mr. Chairman, just because someone has a person of color, a black person working for them, does not mean they aren't racist. And it is insensitive that some would even say it's the fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman, in this chamber, in this committee, is alone racist in itself. Donald Trump is setting a
Mr.
precedent.
Chairman, I ask that her words
Donald
be
Trump
taken
is setting
down.
a precedent. I reclaim my time.
Mr.
Donald
Chairman,
Trump is setting a precedent
Mr.
that
Chairman,
the highest office can be attained
Mr. Chairman, the
through
rules
legal
are clear.
activity. Cover up and hold on to business assets to break campaign finance laws and constitutional clauses. What we have here, Mr. Chairman, is criminal conduct in the pursuit of the highest public office by Mr. Cohen and individual one. I hope that the gravity of this situation hits everyone in this body
The court report.
and in Congress and across this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the rest of my time.
Mr. Chairman,
Here comes
I
Mark
ask that her
Meadows.
words, when she's referring to an individual member of this body, be taken down and stricken from the record. I'm sure she didn't intend to do this.
She called you a racist.
But if anyone knows my record as it relates, it should be you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I would like to.
Hold on.
I want the words read back.
No.
We want to know exactly what she
Excuse
said
me.
about a colleague.
Excuse me. Would you like to rephrase that statement, Ms. Talib?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can actually read it from here. Just to make a note, Mr. Chairman, that just because someone has a person of color, a black person working for them, does not mean they are racist.
And it is insensitive that someone would even say racist, say it is racist in itself, and to use a black woman as a prop to prove it otherwise. And I can submit this for the record. If a colleague is thinking that that's what I'm saying, I'm just saying that's what I believe to have happened. And if, as a person of color in this committee, that's how I felt at that moment, and I wanted to express that. But I am not calling the gentleman, Mr. Meadows, a racist for doing so. I'm saying that in itself, it is a racist act.
Well, I hope not, Mr. Chairman, because I need to be clear on this particular. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meadows, wait a minute.
I've defended you about
Mr. Meadows,
with false
you're black.
Mr. Meadows, I'm the chair.
Yes, sir, you are.
Thank you. I will clear this up.
Oh boy. This is about to get like crazy, off the hook crazy, because obviously that little bit that I played there where Mark Meadows dragged out this Lynn Patton had her stand in front of Congress as a black woman to indicate to the American people that Donald Trump couldn't possibly be be racist, is very offensive to many members of this very diverse Congress. And they have absolutely no reason to withhold saying so. Now, Mark Meadows just got caught being a racist. He was just called somebody who committed a racist act by doing that, and he doesn't like it one damn bit. Well, too damn bad. You cannot play the, well, I have a black friend card, therefore I'm not a racist. To defend this president, who today has been shown to have committed tax evasion, tax fraud, foundation fraud, and campaign violations.
Mary had a little man. The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
All right, if you're just joining us, we are carrying the Michael Cohen testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee in public live today. So far, what we have is evidence of Mark Meadows' racism, also tax evasion by Donald Trump, tax fraud by Donald Trump, campaign violations, obviously, lawyers around Donald Trump, editing testimony for the consumption of Congress under oath, named attorneys being Jay Sekulow. We also have fraud at the Trump Foundation, and just general lying. This is amazing, this day. This is everything. So let's listen back in as Michael Cohen is answering questions from Fast Talker, Congressman Roy. Oh, I'm sorry, I did that. I want to do this.
Everything. My family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom. And I will not sit back, say nothing, and allow him to do the same to the country. Indeed, given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And this is why I agreed to appear before you today.
Oh my God, did you hear that?
In closing, I'd like to say directly to the President,
Did you hear that? No.
we honor our veterans even in the rain. You tell the truth even when it doesn't aggrandize you. You respect the law and our incredible law enforcement agents. You don't villainize them. You don't disparage generals, Gold Star families, prisoners of war, and other heroes who had the courage to fight for this country. You don't attack the media and those who question what you don't like or what you don't want them to say. And you take responsibility for your own dirty deeds. You don't use your power of your bully pulpit to destroy the credibility of those who speak out against you. You don't separate families from one another or demonize those looking to America for a better life. You don't vilify people based on the God they pray to, and you don't cuddle up to our adversaries at the expense of our allies. And finally, you don't shut down the government before Christmas and New Year's just to simply appease your base. This behavior is churlish, it denigrates the office of the president, and it's simply un-American. And it's not you. So to those who support the president and his rhetoric, as I once did, I pray the country doesn't make the same mistakes that I have made or pay the heavy price that my family and I are paying. And I thank you very much for this additional time, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The ranking member has a closing statement.
Oh, no, Mr. Jim
Thank
Jordan.
you, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
we know
child
Mr.
molester.
Cohen has been dishonest in the past.
So have you.
That's why he's going to prison in 2 months.
You should, too.
But there are things today that he said during the several hours of questioning that just don't add up either. He said he never defrauded any bank when he was having a conversation questioning from Mr. Comer. Obviously, that's not true because he's going to prison for that very offense. He said today he was a good lawyer who understood the need to represent his client with legal advice. But in his written testimony, he said he never bothered to consider whether payments to women were improper, much less the right thing to do. He attested in his signed truth and testimony form that he did not have any reportable contracts with foreign government entities. Earlier, he admitted to having consulting agreements with at least 2 foreign entities owned in part by foreign governments, BTA Bank of Kazakhstan and Korea Aerospace
Kazakhstan, you
Industries
moron.
of South Korea. He said to Chairman Cummings that Donald Trump directed him and the Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg to, quote, go back to his office and figure out how to make the $130,000 payment. But in his testimony, he says, Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from the home equity line of credit to avoid any money being traced back to him that could negatively impact the campaign.
They're not exclusive.
And in response to a question about him paying to set up the fake Twitter account at Women for Cohen, that he didn't
fake.
direct the commission of that Twitter account. He says, I didn't set that up, and it was done by a young lady that works for the firm, when in fact, he did ask the IT firm Redfinch to set it up, according to the owner of Redfinch. And finally, he said he didn't want a job with the administration, even though the attorneys with the Southern District of New York stated that this was a fact. When asked about this, they said, I wouldn't call them liars, but that statement is not accurate. Mr. Chairman, I think maybe more importantly is what we should have been doing today. Mr. Meadows and I sent you a letter asking you to have Mr. Rosenstein here. I think it's important to know that last week when you announced that Mr. Cohen was coming this week, just happened to be the very same week that we learned the Deputy Attorney General of the United States was thinking about wearing a wire to record the Commander-in-Chief, was actually contemplating talking to cabinet members and invoking the 25th Amendment. That's what we should be focused on, not this sad display we've had to go through the last several hours. Again, it's not my words. You can take the words of the former General Counsel for the House of Representatives under Tip O'Neill. So I hope we've learned some things here today. But Mr. Chairman, as I said earlier, your first big hearing, the first announced witness of the 116th Congress, is a gentleman who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. I don't think that's what we should be focused on. Yield back.
Thank you very much. You know, I've sat here and I've listened to all of this, and it's very painful. It's very painful. You made a lot of mistakes, Mr. Cohen, and you've admitted that. And, you know, one of the saddest parts of this whole thing is that some very innocent people are hurting too. And you acknowledge that. And that's your family. And so you come here today and I deep in my heart, you know, and when I practiced law, I represented a lot of lawyers who got in trouble. And you've come saying I had made my mistakes. but now I want to change my life. And you know, if we as a nation did not give people an opportunity after they made mistakes to change their lives, a whole lot of people would not do very well. I don't know where you go from here. As I sat here and I listened to both sides, I just felt as if, and you know, people are now using my words that they took from me, that didn't give me any credit. We're better than this. We are so much, we really are. As a country, we are so much better than this. And, you know, I told you, and for some reason, Mr. Cohen, I tell my children, I say when bad things happen to you, do not ask the question, why did it happen to me? Ask the question, why did it happen for me? I don't know why this is happening for you, but it is my hope that a small part of it is for our country to be better. If I hear you correctly, it sounds like you're crying out for a new normal, for us getting back to normal. It sounds to me like you want to make sure that our democracy stays intact. When the one meeting I had with President Trump, I said to him, the greatest gift that you and I, Mr. President, can give to our children is making sure that we give them a democracy that is intact. A democracy better than the one that we came upon. And I'm hoping that the things you said today will help us begin to get back there. You know, I mean, come on now. I mean, when you got, according to the Washington Post, our president has made at least 8,718 false or misleading statements. That's stunning. That's not what we teach our children. I don't teach mine that. And for whatever reason, sounds like you got caught up in it. You got caught up in it. You got caught up in it. And some kind of way, I hope that you will, I know that it's painful going to prison. I know it's got to be painful being called a rat. And let me explain. A lot of people don't know the significance of that, but I live in the inner city of Baltimore. All right? And when you call somebody a rat, that's one of the worst things you can call them, because when they go to prison, that means a snitch. I'm just saying. And so the president called you a rat. We're better than that. We really are. And I'm hoping that all of us can get back to this democracy that we want and that we should be passing on to our children so that they can do better than what we did. And so you wonder whether people believe you. I don't know. I don't know whether they believe you. But the fact is that you come, you have your head down, and this has got to be one of the hardest things that you could do. Let me tell you the picture that really, really pained me. You were leaving the prison, you were leaving the courthouse, and I guess it's your daughter had a braces or something on. Man, that thing hurt me. As a father of two daughters, it hurt me. And I can imagine how it must feel for you. But I'm just saying to you, I want to first of all thank you. I know that this has been hard. I know that you face a lot. I know that you are worried about your family, but this is a part of your destiny. And hopefully, this portion of your destiny will lead to a better Michael Cohen, a better Donald Trump, a better United States of America, and a better world. And I mean that from the depths of my heart. When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, in 2019, what did we do to make sure we kept our democracy intact? Did we stand on the sidelines and say nothing? Did we play games? And I'm tired of these statements saying, people come in here and say, oh, this is the first hearing. It is not the first hearing. The first hearing was with regard to prescription drugs. Remember, a little girl, a lady said there, Miss Wortham, her daughter died because she could not get $333 a month in insulin. That was our first hearing. Second hearing, H.R. 1, voting rights, corruption in government. Come on now. We can do more than one thing. And we have got to get back to normal. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
Wow, that was powerful. That was Elijah Cummings closing the oversight hearing featuring Michael Cohen under oath today. That was stunning. It was, everybody I think is crying right now. Michael Cohen is crying. Elijah Cummings is crying. The audience members are crying. And when he said just now, you know, people are going to ask you, where were you in 2019? We know where Mark Meadows was, and we know where Matt Gaetz was, and we know where Jim Jordan was. They were covering up for a man who obviously deserves to be in no position of honor or trust. Not at his foundation, not at his organization, and definitely not as president of the United States.
Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
Mr. Cohen, several times in your testimony, you state the bad things that you did for Mr. Trump. And at some point, you apparently changed your course of action. There's a recurring refrain in your testimony that says, and yet I continued to work for him. But at some point you changed. What was the breaking point at which you decided to start telling the truth?
There are several factors. Helsinki, Charlottesville, watching the daily destruction of our civility to one another, putting up silly things like this.
Oh, that's silly.
Really unbecoming of Congress. It's that sort of behavior that I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for your silliness because I did the same thing that you're doing now for 10 years. I protected Mr. Trump for 10 years. And the fact that you pull up a news article that has no value to it, and you want to use that as the premise for discrediting me, that I'm not the person that people called at 3 o'clock in the morning, would make you inaccurate. In actuality, it would make you a liar, which puts you into the same position that I am in. And I can only warn people, the more people that follow Mr. Trump, as I did blindly, are going to suffer the same consequences that I'm suffering.
That was one of my favorite moments in the whole thing because all the Republicans came with, and it was all freedom crackers. It was Mark Meadows. It was Jim Jordan. It's this guy, what's his name? Hemming? Is that him? It was the craziest. Virginia Fox, that nutbag. I mean, a woman from West Virginia. What a waste of time. And you're just going to sign a book deal. I mean, it was so ridiculous what the Republicans did in the face of documents and testimony and financial records and the naming of individuals who had knowledge that the president was breaking the law repeatedly while he was president. At the Trump Organization, at the Trump Foundation, tax evasion, tax fraud. He's not under audit. None of this is true. And all the Republicans could do, all they came up with, the only thing that they had was, you're just going to get a book deal is what it is.
Is there a book deal coming or anything like that?
I have no book deal right now.
So can you commit under oath that you have not and will not pursue a book or movie deal based on your experiences working for the president?
No.
Book deal. Now, you're set to go to jail for a couple years. You come out with a multi-million book deal. That's not bad living. Will you today to commit to donate any further proceeds to book deals, to film reviews, to charity?
God.
No.
This world today, with these lucrative book deals, movies that come about, I think you'll be pretty good in about 5 years.
Have you discussed film and book deals with your stated current attorney, Mr. Davis, Lanny Davis?
With Mr. Davis?
Yes.
No. But I have been approached by many people.
Isn't it true you tried to sell a book about your time with President Trump entitled Trump Revolution, From the Tower to the White House? Understanding Donald J. Trump?
Yes, that happened early on when I was still even part, I believe, of the RNC.
And this book deal, which you had with Hatchet Books, was worth around $500,000. Isn't that correct?
No more, ma'am.
How much more?
I think it was about $750.
Wow. Mr. Cohen.
I did turn it down.
That was it. That was everything that they came with. That's all they had. Michael Cohen, a book deal. I loved it. Michael Cohen produced a check signed by Donald Trump while Donald Trump was president of the United States, said that there were 11 more just like it that he could produce with that Richter scale signature on it. It was a seismic event, and the Republicans on the committee kept saying, Cohen lies. Does the check lie? Do the 11 checks lie? I mean, this was just unbelievable. They had Cohen writing letters threatening the high school Donald Trump went to, the college Donald Trump went to, the college board not to release his grades or his SAT score. If you don't want people to know you're a dimwit, Donald, then stop talking. Just shut the F up. Or have at least somebody proofread your tweets. I mean, this was devastating testimony, and the only thing the Republicans had was, I have a black friend, and so Donald Trump can't be a racist because he once hired a party planner who is, standing right here today, and therefore he's not a racist. Also, Michael Cohen lies, therefore the president is under audit, even though he's not. The president didn't buy his own portrait with his own foundation's check when he did. The president didn't engage in tax fraud. Clearly, he did on those financial disclosure forms. The president didn't commit tax evasion, even though clearly he did. And that's why he won't produce his tax returns. Jay Sekulow, the president's attorney, lied and edited Michael Cohen's testimony so that it would be the same testimony that Donald Trump wanted to give with regard to everything from Stormy Daniels to the Trump Tower Moscow deal that was ongoing. In this hearing today, Jay Sekulow was fingered. Rudy Giuliani was fingered. Corey Lewandowski was fingered. Roger Stone, Jr., Ivanka, everyone, the lawyers, all of them that he named everyone. It was amazing. And he's been threatened, and he understands the veracity of those threats because he used to be the one who threatened people for Donald Trump. So that now Donald Trump is threatening his father-in-law. Donald Trump is threatening his children. Donald Trump is threatening his wife. And Michael Cohen is terrified because he knows that when he threatened people, they backed it up. Everyone was named today. Everyone. It was just the most amazing display of corruption in a president. I mean, you got to remember that this Alexander Butterfield moment that people like to remember, and they always forget who Alexander Butterfield was, but he was the person who, under oath, during the Watergate hearings, said, sort of as an aside, that Nixon had a taping system in the White House. And that was the shot heard around the world. That went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, the Rehnquist court, in a unanimous decision, said that Nixon had to turn over the tapes. Well, Michael Cohen also has tapes. Michael Cohen also has documents. And guess what? Those documents have been turned over. You don't even need to go to the Supreme Court. And the Republicans literally ripped the flesh off Michael Cohen for turning over those documents because they say his first duty was to the lawyer-client privilege, and he violated it when, under subpoena, he was raided and those documents were given or taken by SDNY. Those documents were taken by Mueller and clearly showed that they were not attorney-client privileged documents at all. They were Michael Cohen doing dirty business deals and threatening people and making payments, hush money payments, to women that Donald Trump had affairs with that he wanted covered up in the middle of a freaking presidential election. That's all they had. They literally said to him, you should be brought before the bar. He goes, I lost my law license. Well, you should be brought before the bar again. What? I'll tell you who's the next one to be brought before the bar. Matt Gaetz is going before the bar. He's going before the ethics committee as well. You know, last night somebody tweeted out that we should report Matt Gaetz for threatening the witness, Michael Cohen, on behalf of the president, which is exactly what Michael Cohen was telling them. I protected the president for 10 years, and look where I am. Look where it got me. And you and all of you today that are attacking me, you're going to all end up the way I am ending up. No good can come from protecting this cult of personality known as Donald J. Trump. No good can come from it, and yet you do it. You're doing it. You know the truth, and you're still doing it. Matt Gaetz did it last night, and so somebody tweeted out Matt Gaetz's bar number here in Florida and said we should report him to the Florida bar, and guess what? I did. Yeah, now he's under investigation by the Florida bar. Yay. Yay for us. He's also going to be referred to the ethics committee for witness tampering.
But I want to apologize for the inappropriate comments and tweets that have been made by other members of this body. And as a former prosecutor and as former counsel on House ethics, I think that at the very least there should be a referral to the ethics committee of witness intimidation or tampering under USC 1512 of my colleague Matt Gaetz, and it may be possibly him being referred for a criminal prosecution. So I want to put that on the record.
Thank God. He tweets out last night, Matt Gaetz does. He tweets out, I wasn't tampering, I was testing. And you're not even on the oversight committee. Shut up. You know, you are a sycophant. There is something extraordinarily wrong with you. He is a cult member, Gaetz. Okay, he is. Today, the reason why we had this recess in the middle of this hearing was so that the House could vote on, for the first time, meaningful, universal background checks before you can get an Uzi as a 16-year-old, okay? And that's why there was this break in the testimony today. You know, I swear to God, these people are just lunatics. They're Matt Gaetz, you know, when he was confronted the other day by one of the parents of a dead child from Parkland, okay? He raised holy hell and said, oh, no, No, it's not. That's not the threat that America faces from, nameless, faceless gunmen that come shooting up schools like Sandy Hook or Columbine or Marjorie Stoneman. No. That's not a thing. A thing is the southern border and the violence on the he just makes crap up. He'll say any damn thing this president puts into his head. It's the sickest freaking array of Republicans I have ever seen in my life, and I've seen some really sick, twisted Republicans. But I mean, this is just a bizarro world that we've entered into. I mean, he tried to say immigrant violence is worse for our kids than shooters in their schools, and of course they're going through these shooter drills, right?
The pain and anguish and sense of loss felt by those all over the country who have been the victims of violence at the hands of illegal aliens. H.R. 8 would not have stopped many of the circumstances I raised, but a wall, a barrier on the southern border may have, and that's what we're fighting for.
Mr. Chairman.
Well,
Gentlemen will suspend. Everyone here is here as a guest of the committee, and no matter what you think of what any member of the committee may say, or any witness for that matter, you must not comment or otherwise demonstrate.
Mr. Chairman, may I have my time restored?
Your time will be restored.
Oh, my God.
Appreciate that. And so again, I think that was a rather instructive moment for the committee, Mr. Chairman, because as we gather here in Washington, there are a divergent series of views and inputs and thoughts. And my concern is that by adopting H.R. 8, we actually stifle the innovation that could lead to better public safety outcomes if we allowed states and local communities to deal with the challenges my great state of Florida has. And so again, I hope that we'll deal with all of the drivers of violence. The greatest driver of violence in the circumstances that I indicated was not the firearm. It was the fact that we have an immigration system that allows people to come here violently. We engage in...
There will be no comments.
It goes on like that, okay? It goes on like that. And Matt Gaetz asks that, the parent be removed from the hearing room. The parent must be... I swear to God, these are cult members. These are Jim Jones, drink the Kool-Aid. If he says cyanide is the way to go, they would do it. They would freaking do it. I don't know how Jackie Spear keeps it together in the presence of a cult leader being the president of the United States, because, Jackie Spear literally was shot 5 times on the tarmac in Jonestown because when she got to Jonestown, Guyana, the congressman that she was a legislative assistant to had absolutely no security detail. And everybody at Jonestown saw an airplane that the congressman and Jackie Spear, the legislative assistant, came in on, and they all wanted to get the hell out of there. And there was a rush for the airplane, and Jim Jones ordered shooting. And Jackie Spear was shot 5 times. 5 times.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, you can let us know what you thought of this today. I'm just going to play you a little bit of some criminal activity.
Mr. Cohen, is it your testimony that Mr. Trump had advanced knowledge of the Russia WikiLeaks release of the DNC's emails?
I cannot answer that in a yes or no. He had advanced notice that there was going to be a dump of emails, but at no time did I hear the specificity of what those emails were going to be.
But you do testify today that he had advanced knowledge of their imminent release.
That is what I had stated in my testimony.
And that he cheered that outcome.
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mr. Trump likely share this information with his daughter Ivanka, son Don Jr., or Jared Kushner?
I'm not aware of that.
Was Ivanka, Jared, or Don Jr. still involved in the Russian tower deal at that time?
The company was involved in the deal, which meant that the family was involved in the deal.
If Mr. Trump and his daughter Ivanka and son Donald Jr. are involved in the Russian Trump tower deal, is it possible the whole family is conflicted or compromised with a foreign adversary in the months before the election?
Yes.
I mean, these were simple answers. These were very straightforward, simple answers. There was no hedging. There was no explaining. It was yes or no. It was, and he did testify that Roger Stone was on a speakerphone and that Rona Graff, the secretary, while Michael Cohen was in Donald Trump's office at Trump Tower, Rona Graff yelled out, "Roger Stone is on the phone." And the president of the United States, who was running for president, put him on a speakerphone so all in the room could hear, and that included Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen heard Roger Stone say that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange and that another dump was coming. Now, the Republicans tried to say, yeah, well, Julian Assange said that WikiLeaks was dumping documents back in June. Right, that was the first dump. And then all throughout the campaign, Roger Stone is direct messaging with Guccifer, and he's getting information about the next dump, and he is talking to Julian Assange, and Julian Assange is telling him. And then the day of the Billy Bush tape, which was right before the election, they are scrambling at the Trump campaign to get back in touch with Julian Assange because they desperately need him to dump even more emails, even more to distract from Donald Trump on tape saying that he sexually assaults women by grabbing them by the P word, that he just does it, and that he just kisses women, strange women, any women he wants, and he eats Tic Tacs before he does it so he's not offensive to the women he's offending. I mean, how completely dense as a man do you have to be to think that if you're going to molest me, if you're going to grope me, if you're going to literally rape me, that if you eat a Tic Tac, it's okay? This is a very sick and twisted bunch. So while that testimony was being given, while Michael Cohen was testifying that he was in Trump Tower and Roger Stone called to say that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange. And of course, the president's quote on Roger Stone is he never talked to Roger Stone during the campaign. Never. Which was demonstrably false. Roger Stone is under a gag order, as you know, because Roger Stone threatened the judge. Same judge that Manafort had, Amy Berman Jackson, threatened her in a tweet, put up a grainy photograph of her with crosshairs or a Celtic cross. Oh my God, how white supremacist do you have to be, freaks? And she pulled him in and she said, okay, complete gag order. You are to talk to no one, not to tweet, no social media, no television, no nothing. No nothing pending your trial. Well, he couldn't resist. Zoe Tillman is the legal reporter for BuzzFeed. And during this testimony, Roger Stone tweeted her. And she said, Zoe Tillman tweeted, that she was following this testimony. She said, Cohen says he's working with SDNY on several other issues of investigation. And then she tweets, Roger Stone texted us today that Michael Cohen's testimony that Stone told Trump in July 2016 that he'd spoken to Julian Assange about a doc dump is not true. Stone is under a gag order not to talk about his case, Mueller's probe, or any participants. And he does it anyway. Roger Stone has got to be collected. He needs to get his things and just be admitted in a cell, next to Paul Manafort. I mean, these people, you know what? Even down to North Carolina, that guy Dowles, what is his name? The one that collected all of the absentee ballots and threw them away or filled them out and then submitted them. He just was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to obstruct justice. These people are all so freaking dirty. Jim Jordan, as I told you, was very and fully aware of the fact that a doctor for the Ohio State University varsity sports teams was molesting students one after the other, taking 6 showers a day with students His own friend went on television and said, look, Jim Jordan's a friend of mine. I've been friends with Jim Jordan since he was my assistant coach. It's been like 40 years and blah, blah, blah. But of course Jim Jordan knew. I don't know why he's lying. This is some collection of human flotsam and jetsam. I mean, it's really hard to even believe that they are human. These are disgusting people. And you know what's really interesting? They accused Michael Cohen of trying to advance his career and doing this for a freaking book deal or a movie. Meanwhile, Jim Jordan thinks he's advancing his career by kissing Donald Trump's fraudulent ass. He's now the new Michael Cohen. Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, this Hemming guy. I mean, all these Republicans on the Oversight Committee today, they all did Trump's dirty work for him today. And Michael Cohen tried to tell him, you're going to end up just where I am. You're going to end up just where I am right now. You know, I've done this for 10 years, and I got to say, this is just, it's a road that leads nowhere. And I'm trying to tell you, and I'm trying, and you just don't want to believe me. He even said to them, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm telling you everything and I'm showing you everything. And not one of you GOP members has asked me one thing about Donald Trump. All you do is sit there and call me a liar. The president is a liar. Jay Sekulow is a liar. Corey Lewandowski is a liar. Giuliani is a liar. Roger Stone is a liar. Junior is a liar. Ivanka is a liar. I'm a liar. And I'm the only one that's going to pay for it because I'm turning my life around. But you people are doing exactly what I did.
The president says so far approximately 9,000.
I got 8 seconds. I got 8 seconds. I'll let you finish.
Chairman, may I please finish?
The special counsel
Chairman, can I please finish?
Something they've never done. They said that story was false. Now you can respond.
Okay. My response. The president has told something over 9,000 lies to date. Do I ask Mr. Davis or Mr. Monaco, or do I go on television in order to correct his mistakes?
When Mr. Davis goes on to talk about that specific subject,
the answer is no. And I would like to also...
Listen up. The gentleman's time has expired. You may finish answering the question, and then we're going to go to Mr. Connolly.
All I wanted to say is I just find it interesting, sir, that between yourself and your colleagues, that not one question so far since I'm here has been asked about President Trump. That's actually why I thought I was coming today, not to confess the mistakes that I've made. I've already done that, and I'll do it again every time you ask me about taxes or mistakes. Yes, I made my mistakes. I'll say it now again, and I'm going to pay the ultimate price. But I'm not here today, and the American people don't care about my taxes. They want to know what it is that I know about Mr. Trump, and not one question so far has been asked about Mr. Trump.
Mr. Connolly.
Oh, that was amazing, and so was this.
A recurring theme in your testimony is concern for your family's safety. What specifically are you most concerned about?
Well, the president, unlike my Cohen for Trump that has 1,000 followers, he's got over 60 million people. And when Mr. Trump turned around early in the campaign and said, I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it, I want to be very clear. He's not joking. He's telling you the truth. You see, you don't know him. I do. I sat next to this man for 10 years, and I watched his back. I'm the one who started the campaign, and I'm the one who continued in 2015 to promote him. So many things I thought that he can do that are just great. And he can, and he is doing things that are great. But this destruction of our civility to one another is just, it's out of control. And when he goes on Twitter and he starts bringing in my in-laws, my parents, my wife, what does he think is going to happen? He's sending out the same message that he can do whatever he wants. This is his country. He's becoming an autocrat. And hopefully something bad will happen to me or my children or my wife so that I will not be here and testify. That's what his hope was. It was to intimidate me. And again, I thanked everybody who joined and said that this is just not right.
Have you ever seen Mr. Trump personally threaten people with physical harm?
No. He would use others.
He would use others.
He would hire other people to do that?
I'm not so sure that he had to hire them. They were already working there.
Huh.
Everybody's job at the Trump Organization is to protect Mr. Trump. Every day, most of us knew we were coming in and we were going to lie for him on something. And that became the norm. And that's exactly what's happening right now in this country. And it's exactly what's happening here in government, sir.
Wow. That is right out of The Godfather. Yeah, he had a lot of buffers. He had a lot of buffers. Did you ever hear him or see him commit a murder? No, it doesn't work that way. You know, he calls in, he says he wants you to push a button, you push a button. So did you ever get an order from him to push a button? No, he had a lot of buffers. He had a lot of buffers, Mr. Senator. That was scary testimony. That was crazy, unbelievable testimony. That he isn't joking when he says he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. And he doesn't have to do it himself. Everyone that works for him is part of this cult, and they will do it for him at his behest. That is what you heard today. And the cult members are going to say, so what? Makes him strong. No, it makes him a hitman. It makes him a criminal. It makes him the head of a criminal organization. And if you don't want to listen to witnesses who have decided to confess to their crimes and give testimony on the people above them, then you better throw out all mafia prosecutions. You better throw out all RICO Act cases, because that is what they depend on. Racketeering depends on people who have done very bad things, confessing to those very bad things, getting a little bit of leniency for doing those very bad things if they cooperate in order to bring down the entire cartel. You wouldn't have any convictions of any drug cartels. You wouldn't have any convictions of any mafiosos. You wouldn't have any RICO Act violations. You wouldn't have any successful prosecutions of money laundering or any of those things without somebody being first. And that's what Michael Cohen did. And now, is he a thug? Yes, he's a thug. Is he going to jail? Yeah, he's going to jail. But you know what's really strange and horrible and ugly and unconscionable? He's the only one. Junior's not. Ivanka's not. Weisselberg has immunity. Where's Roger Stone? Well, maybe he'll go to jail. He should go to jail today, actually, for violating his gag order. But everybody knew. That's what you found out today. The kids knew. Trump still knows. Everybody knows. This is a lie in plain sight. This is a crime in plain sight now. There were documents and checks. It's done. Buy a stinking podcast.